If your very first thought when your alarm went off this morning was, how soon can I crawl back into this bed? Well, welcome to The Explainer. We're diving straight into a question that is probably on your mind right now. Why do so many of us feel completely, utterly drained every single day? We live in an era of unbelievable convenience, right? Yet somehow, we're all running on fumes. Today, we're going to unpack the biology, the environment, and the sneaky psychological drains causing this modern exhaustion epidemic.
It's the exact question you've probably asked yourself while staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. Or, reaching for that third cup of coffee at 3 p.m., just praying it'll be the one that finally kicks in. Why are we always so tired? Listen, I want to validate your experience right off the bat here. If you're feeling this way, you are absolutely not alone. Being chronically exhausted, it's an incredibly common modern phenomenon. And no, it's not just a sign that you need a weekend getaway. It's actually a really complex, systemic issue. And the sheer scale of this is just staggering. Recent CDC data from the National Health Interview Survey shows that about 13.5% of all U.S. adults feel very tired or exhausted most days. But here's where it gets really interesting. It disproportionately hits younger women. A massive 20.3% of women aged 18 to 44 report chronic exhaustion. Compare that to 11% of men in the exact same age bracket. That's literally 1 in 5 young women waking up exhausted almost every single day. Keep that gender gap in the back of your mind because we're going to see exactly why that happens in just a bit. So to make sense of all this, we'll quickly walk through the modern exhaustion epidemic, how our screens mess with our sleep architecture, the silent drain of cognitive load, hormones and blood sugar, gut health and ME/CFS, and then wrap up with some evidence-based energy recovery. All right, starting with section 1, the modern exhaustion epidemic. Let's look at the actual foundation of how our bodies regulate energy and sleep pressure. Because your body doesn't just randomly decide to be tired, right? It operates on a very strict neurobiological architecture. Let's demystify the biology here. Every single time your brain or body uses cellular energy, specifically ATP, it leaves behind a neurochemical byproduct called adenosine. I like to think of adenosine kind of like a metabolic receipt. Every time your cells spend energy, a little receipt is printed, and they just pile up in your brain as you go about your day. This massive pile creates what scientists call process S, or the homeostatic sleep drive. While we're awake, the receipts pile up. When we sleep, specific enzymes finally sweep in and clear them all out. But if you cut your sleep short, that clearance is incomplete. You wake up with a desk still full of yesterday's receipts, leaving you with that heavy, foggy morning fatigue. Moving right along to section 2, sleep architecture and screens. Let's see how our modern technology actively sabotages this whole biological clearing process. Process S doesn't work alone. It constantly interacts with your circadian rhythm. The big issue here is that late-night screen time actively stops your brain from triggering the sleep cycle you desperately need to wash away all that adenosine. See, your circadian rhythm, known as process C, relies on darkness to signal the release of melatonin. But the blue light blasting from our phones, our tablets, our TVs, it literally tricks the photoreceptors in our eyes into thinking the sun is shining. So your brain is screaming, "I'm exhausted," because of all the adenosine buildup, but your internal clock is yelling, "Hey, it's high noon," because of your phone. It completely fractures the sleep architecture you need to recover. Okay, section 3, the silent cognitive drain. What if you are getting a full 8 hours, you're putting the phone away, but you're still completely dead by 5 p.m.? Let's talk about the psychological weight of everyday life. For the longest time, psychology leaned heavily on the ego depletion theory. This idea that your willpower is literally a fuel tank that just runs dry. But science has actually shifted toward this fascinating new concept called the motivational model. Turns out we don't just run out of gas. Instead, after sustained mental effort, our brains actively choose to conserve energy. When you are drowning in choices, your prefrontal cortex basically acts like a CEO cutting costs, prioritizing resource conservation over careful decision-making. You aren't lazy or weak. Your brain is just playing aggressive defense with your energy. And the triggers pushing your brain into this conservation mode? They're usually completely invisible. It's the micro-decision of switching from your email to a chat app. It's the cognitive transition cost of every single smartphone notification. It's the silent, grinding burden of household and meal planning. And crucially, look at caregiver burden. Anticipating the needs of dependents and managing a home falls disproportionately on women, which perfectly explains that CDC data we talked about earlier. Your brain is totally wiped out because it's making thousands of unacknowledged choices every single day. Next up, section 4, hormones and blood sugar. Peeling back another layer here. We need to explore how chemical imbalances inside our bodies can physically starve our cells of energy, even when we're resting and eating perfectly well. The prime suspects are usually hiding in our endocrine system. Take insulin, for example. With an unbalanced diet or a lack of physical activity, you can actually develop insulin resistance. This means your bloodstream might be packed with glucose, but insulin can't unlock your cells to let that fuel inside. So your cells are literally starving for energy while you're just sitting there feeling like you're moving through wet concrete. Add to that the sudden cortisol spikes from chronic stress, an underactive thyroid just dragging your whole metabolism down, or the stamina-draining fluctuations of estrogen, and you've got the perfect biochemical recipe for chronic daytime sleepiness. All right, Section 5, Gut Health and ME/CFS. Now we are diving into the deepest layer, investigating what happens when chronic exhaustion is actually a systemic, pathological breakdown. This is where we look way beyond just being tired.
It is absolutely vital we distinguish everyday tiredness from myalgic encephalomyelitis or chronic fatigue syndrome, usually just called ME/CFS. Normal fatigue scales with how hard you worked, right? And crucially, it gets better after a good night's sleep. ME/CFS is an entirely different beast. The fatigue lasts for 6 months or more, and sleep offers zero relief. Worse, it triggers something called post-exertional malaise, where even a tiny bit of physical or mental effort causes a severe, debilitating crash that can leave a person completely bedbound.
So where on earth does this severe condition come from? Well, groundbreaking research is now mapping this severe fatigue directly to our gut microbiome. Scientists are finding that ME/CFS patients share a measurable biological pattern: dysbiosis, which is an unhealthy microbial mix in the intestines, and a lower capacity to produce butyrate, a vital nutrient that acts as the main fuel for your gut lining. When that lining weakens, it fires off systemic inflammatory signals all throughout the body, and these inflammatory molecules can actually travel to the nervous system and the brain. That causes profound neuroinflammation, manifesting as severe physical exhaustion and brain fog. It is literally a body-wide breakdown in communication.
Which brings us to Section 6, Evidence-Based Energy Recovery. Okay, so we've looked at the brain, the hormones, the gut. How do we actually fix this and get our vitality back?
Instead of chasing random wellness trends on social media, let's look at what clinical science proves will actually restore your energy. Because not all advice is equal. Tier 1, the strongest evidence, points to keeping a consistent sleep schedule to anchor that circadian rhythm, along with regular exercise and cutting out evening alcohol. Tier 2 shows moderate evidence for cutting off afternoon caffeine and limiting screens. But interestingly, Tier 3 shows that things like elaborate, hour-long bedtime routines or strictly avoiding all daytime naps, the clinical evidence for those is actually super mixed, meaning you really don't need a 12-step incense-burning ritual to feel better. Focus your effort on the top tiers first. So here are the highly actionable steps you can take tonight to start clearing out that adenosine and protecting your cognitive budget. First, anchor your wake time. Yes, even on the weekends. Second, cut the caffeine by early afternoon. Caffeine literally blocks adenosine from registering in your brain, and it has a half-life of up to 9 hours. That 3 p.m. latte is still messing with your brain at midnight. Third, protect your melatonin by ditching screens an hour before bed. And finally, if you've done all of this and you're still completely drained after 6 months, please consult a specialist to check for insulin resistance, thyroid issues, or ME/CFS. I really want to leave you with a final thought to challenge how you spend your energy tomorrow. We've seen how absolutely everything, from a single smartphone notification to a hidden insulin spike, drains our biological batteries. So, if you audited your daily cognitive and physical energy budget, what invisible choices are bankrupting your rest? Take a hard look at your routines, protect that prefrontal cortex, and start reclaiming your energy. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I truly hope this helps you wake up feeling just a little more refreshed tomorrow.